Hi everyone, I'm VJ Timms. I'm the branch president of Imperial UCU, and I put together a video for Imperial UCU members following the recent events on the national dispute on pensions, USS pensions, and the national pay dispute. So the purpose of this video is to try and provide some comments and clarification as best I can on recent events that have been publicised regarding the national UCU dispute. This follows me receiving several queries from Imperial UCU members as to exactly what is happening. Now, I'm not fully party to absolutely everything that's going on, but I'm going to try and provide a view as best I can. Rather than do a lengthy written discourse, I've tried to do this in a video, so let's see how well this goes. I'll add that a lot of what's happened has evoked strong opinions, and it's divided opinions across the union. In my role as branch president, I'm going to try and report factually and neutrally as best I possibly can. Occasionally, it will be difficult to do this completely neutrally, so occasionally I will provide my own view, but I'll highlight if I know for sure that this view isn't shared by all people involved. And necessarily, for reasons of brevity, I'm going to have to simplify situations, and I'll try and make things as simple as possible, but no simpler for the purposes of this recording. So first off, a high-level overview of the national disputes. So UCU members in higher education are involved in two long-running disputes with employers. First off, there's a dispute over pay and working conditions. This is sometimes known as the four fights dispute, where the four fights are pay, workload, equality, and casualisation. Casualisation broadly refers to having staff on fixed-term contracts as opposed to open-ended or permanent contracts. And then the second dispute is a dispute over cuts to the USS pension scheme. Now, roughly 150 institutes are involved in four fights, but not Imperial. Imperial's not involved in four fights, and neither are a handful of other institutions. The reason Imperial is not involved is that it is not involved in national pay bargaining, which it withdrew from in approximately 2005. Of course, things are not much better here regarding pay, as we have our own local pay dispute. I won't be talking about that very much today at all, except occasionally to remind you to please vote in the reballot on local pay. Now, about 70 institutions are involved in the USS pension dispute, and this, of course, includes Imperial College. Imperial is slightly unusual in that it's one of only four institutions, I believe, that's involved in the national USS pensions dispute, but not the four fights, alongside, I believe, Reading, Cranfield, and the Scottish Association of Marine Science. Now, UCU members in affected institutions were balloted on whether to take industrial action over the disputes relevant to their institution in late summer 2022. So if you were at an institution that was involved in both of the disputes, you received two ballot papers to vote on, and if you were involved in just one, like Imperial, you received one ballot paper to vote on. The votes came in and saw a resounding yes vote for both disputes, meaning the union had a 6-month mandate to take industrial action in terms 1 and 2. Why 6 months? Well, that's the way UK laws on industrial action work. Once you have a mandate to take strike action, you can use it for 6 months. Of course, we want to try and avoid strike action, so the whole idea is we have these mandates, but then the UCU negotiators would go to the employers and try and take measures to win the disputes and call off the strikes. We had some strike action earlier in the year, but I'm going to refer to the current round of strike action in the next few slides, which were 18 days of strike action called for February and March 2023. An important thing to recognise, especially for institutes like Imperial, is that the two national disputes have been coupled. So what does this mean? Well, it means a few things, but one of the things is regarding strike days. It means that any of the days of national strike action that were called for both disputes in one, so both the USS pensions dispute and the four fights dispute. I'll not go into the reasons why, but this is arguably problematic for institutions involved in just one of the disputes. And I'll just add something else here, that UCU policy dictates that they maintain the link between the two disputes until sufficient progress is made in one or both to justify separation. Some people at Imperial thought that it would be much better to decouple the disputes and have strike days that were either allocated to one or the other. for the national strike days, and in fact we had motions tabled in October and January. October 2022 and January the 23, asking for the disputes to be uncoupled, which actually passed at all members' meetings at Imperial College. These weren't unanimously passed. There were people with principled and reasoned arguments against. However, they did get through with reasonably strong majorities. So in October and January, we took these passed motions to UCU head office and asked them to consider them. They were sympathetic to the requests, but on both occasions they were unable to grant the requests as they were contrary to recent national committee and conference decisions. So the disputes have remained coupled all the way through. An extraordinary event happened in week 7 of term, or rather the end of week 6 of our term at Imperial College. So there were 3 days of national strike action, you'll recall, announced well in advance from the 21st to the 23rd of February, in the middle of this 18 days. And late in the afternoon on Friday the 17th of February, the union announced unexpectedly that this week of strike action was paused, and the idea was to pause the strike action by agreement with the employers in order to focus on negotiations with the employer. This was an extremely contentious decision. It rendered many union activists extremely angry, and much of this anger was directed towards the General Secretary and some other elected officials of the union. I did a bit of reading on this at the time, and I'll not provide my own opinion on what I think, but I will say that even the most favourable of the pieces reporting what had happened said that if the General Secretary wasn't quite in breach of the rules, she nearly was, and that to have announced the pause without running it by with a broader community of elected officials was not something that should have been done. The least favourable of the critiques were absolute in their opinion that the General Secretary had broken the rules and actually abused her position of power as General Secretary. The General Secretary has been visiting branches to promote the reballot, and she visited our branch after one of our local days of action on pay, and came along to an all-members meeting to discuss the reballot, and faced some very tough questions from our members. She really got given quite a hard time answering questions about why she'd announced the pause in this way. This happened at several other branches as well, I believe. I'll just take a short aside from the timeline of recent events now, just to remind people what the current grounds for dispute on the USS pension dispute are. So bear in mind that whenever you have strike action, you have to have concrete things that you're in dispute over. Now, the USS pensions dispute has been running for over a decade now in various forms, and every time we have strike action, there will be a very specific thing that we're on strike over, essentially what the union is asking for, and if these demands are met, then that should be the end of the strike action. So just a reminder on what these two are on this particular occasion. So it's that the pension benefits are restored to the position before the cuts were imposed in April 2022, these 35% cuts, and that the prudent and evidence-based valuation of the scheme is conducted. Family cat, Madame Mangosteen, has come to join me for this one. So on the 15th of March, all UCU members were contacted in the mid-afternoon by head office advertising positive developments in 2 disputes. I'll not talk about the 4 fights offer here, other than to say that it has been widely thought of as not very good, but I will talk about the USS pensions offer applicable to Imperial, which was reacted to rather more favourably. So essentially, regarding the pensions offer, employers have apparently agreed to the 2 demands of the UCU in the disputes, as well as a third thing, reducing the pension scheme member contribution, so essentially exceeding what the union's demands are in the current round of strike action. The principal caveat with this is that there is no guarantee that the employers will stick to this, that the time frame for implementation is protracted over several months. It kind of has to be protracted over several months. It can't be done very soon. I've got a link at the end to a piece that people have written explaining the issues with the pensions deal. I would say at the time I did hear people have some quite heated opinions saying that this pension deal was not very good at all. It seems that people have mellowed on this over time, and at the moment I think most people are agreeing that this is a pretty good move regarding pensions, though potentially could be better if there were some sort of guarantee. But it's difficult to see what could actually be done here. I'll add another thing here, which is really important. These announcements were made without consultation of elected officials on the Higher Education Committee, and this was again something that was extremely contentious. Essentially, the General Secretary and a couple of high-level elected officials have come out of the negotiations with employers, and then, without running this by other elected officials, have run it by the membership, including the e-ballot, which I'll talk about in a second. And again, this is something where it's been argued that this is a breach of union procedure. Another break from the timeline to encourage you to vote in the reballot, and why it's important to vote yes, because it's pertinent to what we said in the last slide. So the employers have agreed to the demands and something additional to that as well. However, they could go back on their promise. The current mandate for strike action expires in April, and we really need to be able to go back out and strike again should the employers go back on their word, which is something that could happen. Obviously, we hope it won't. So this is why it's absolutely essential that you vote in the reballot. And my own personal, we're not going to ask how you vote, but my own personal opinion and the union line, which I agree with, is that everybody should be voting yes to strike action in the reballot. So we've got that ready to use should we need to months down the line when it actually comes to the implementation. As well as the offers that came through on Wednesday, you were also given an e-poll to vote in. I'll just read the question. Do you support UCU members now getting a vote on the negotiated proposals that have been reached and pausing strike action short of strike would continue whilst this consultation takes place? Yes or no? With no option for abstention and no comments to include. This was an absolutely extraordinary feature to include in the communication, and the poll was the subject of severe criticism from various angles. In my view, it was undeniably a flawed poll. First of all, it's giving a yes or no when there are two questions blended into one. For Imperial College UCU members, this was particularly difficult because it's asking you a single question about both of the offers in one when you are not involved in the four fights dispute, and you couldn't be expected to go through the 19-page transcript to get your head around the other offer and make an opinion on it in the short time it was providing. It didn't outline what the purpose of the poll was, nor how the results would be used, which is to me absolutely extraordinary that they'd produce a poll that was doing this. It said that it didn't really give a proper time frame for the poll. It said there was going to, I think, 48 hours minimum, but then the poll, apparently for people who waited nearly the 48 hours, was closed by then, which has led to inevitable speculation that, they were waiting until they got a result a certain way and then closed it when they were happy with the numbers. I don't know whether that's true, but that's what people are inevitably speculating. There's also the point about during a strike, who is checking email anyway? Again, inevitably, because the question is so confused and convoluted, this led to people reading ulterior motives into the reasons for the poll. Notably, people were saying that they believed that this was trying to engineer members to vote in a certain direction in order, frankly, that people were saying that this has been done in a way where they're trying to get the strike called off. And yet again, this was something that came through on the communications without it being run by several elected officials who believed and have a very strong case for believing they should have been informed and consulted on whether this poll was done. So this led to some extreme consternation from the membership. On Thursday, the 16th of March, following our Pickett, we had an all-members meeting, a hybrid meeting, where some of us were present in the student union, some joined online. There were just over 25 members present for most of the meeting, so reasonably low attendance, unfortunately, and only a tiny fraction of union membership, unfortunately. Now, we did discuss quite a few things here, but the two things which were pertinent to this video are, one, a motion had been submitted to take to the annual Congress, the UCU annual Congress in May, to censure, so to formally reprimand the General Secretary for conduct during the past few weeks. This motion had been written and submitted prior to the Wednesday announcement, but included a couple of amendments. This was narrowly passed. I think there were something like 10 to 9 in favour with several abstentions, and it was one of several motions passed by several other branches I know for a fact have passed motions to take to annual Congress saying the same thing. So this will be probably something which is taken as a composite motion. When they get several motions which say the same thing, they add them together and say this is a motion from several branches. And then at the end, we had a discussion on the e-ballot. I forgot to mention on the last slide that Charlotte Kessner and I were invited to later that day on the Thursday to attend a branch delegates meeting to discuss the branch's position on the e-poll. We were asked, Lottie and I were asked to gauge what people in our branch thought of the e-poll and come and give a branch position. This is as well as each of the individual members having the vote. Now, we had a discussion of this and then did the vote. I'd say that even the people who were sympathetic to the USS pension deal and also sympathetic to the idea of consultation and calling off the strike didn't feel inclined to say yes to answering the poll because they felt it was so convoluted and didn't properly include Imperial College as an institute which was only involved in one of the disputes. So they didn't feel they could properly answer yes to this. So we had 0 votes for yes, 11 for no, and 10 abstentions. So Lottie and I attended this aforementioned branch delegates meeting on Thursday afternoon or Thursday early evening. This was attended by representatives from most of the affected institutes, where it had 1 or 2 reps. So there's about 250 people present at this 2-hour meeting, where supposedly the idea was to get feedback from each of the branches. So this was going to be impossible to do within 2 hours. But unfortunately, the e-poll was really the source of some consternation, and so too many people wanted to talk and make their point. And I'm sorry to say that the meeting fell apart rather because too many people were trying to make their points. The points I needed to make about Imperial College, I wasn't able to do, but thankfully people from other branches made points that Lottie and I would have made anyway when they were called to speak earlier on in the meeting. They did do a vote on the actual poll, but at the behest of the delegates, attendees were actually asked to vote on split questions. So we were asked to vote on whether there should be a consultation, that's one vote, and then whether there should be whether the strike should be suspended. And we voted. We were put a little bit on the spot here because we hadn't actually gauged branch opinion for the split question. So I had to sort of guess what members might go for. So I guessed and voted in favour of consultation, which came through, as you can see, on the majority, and then against suspension, which you can see against suspension also came through on the majority of the branch delegates meeting. On Friday, the 17th of March in the afternoon, the Higher Education Committee, the HEC of the UCU, met to deliberate the results of the poll and the opinions that came through from the branch delegates meeting the day before. Now, the HEC is a high-level subcommittee of the UCU made up of 42 elected representatives from across the HE sector. I'll put a link at the end, which you can get in with your UCU password to see where each of these members, and they're elected for in the annual election. So we've got 42 people making up this committee. This is a high-level decision-making body. It's their role, it's their whole job to make critical calls on what the union does in HE matters. And it was the HEC's job to make a decision on how to use the results of the members' e-poll and the branch delegates meeting information to inform what the union does next. So you've seen the results from the branch delegates meeting in the previous slide. The members' poll we got communicated to on Friday. It appeared on Twitter and it also appeared on via email. Showed that they'd had quite a strong voting turnout, 36,000 votes on the e-poll, and the way it was presented was, they said, you can read it there on the screenshot I've got from Twitter. Members voted by more than 2 to 1 to confirm they wanted to be consulted on proposals. When I saw this communication, it perplexed me and it perplexed many others, because I really didn't feel that that was what the question was asking. So I felt this was, well, I don't want to sort of cast aspersions, but there was something wrong with the way they were presenting this information, and I made one of my very rare tweets when I responded to this, saying this really wasn't what the question asked. And yes, well, having had a look at Twitter, and I wouldn't recommend that any of you go into the quagmire that is Twitter, unless you're already au fait with it, to try and make sense of things. But this was one of the milder responses to people on the results of the poll. So the Higher Education Committee have got this information, and it is their job to decide how to use it. So I'm not on the HEC myself, nor is anyone at Imperial. So as to what's happened at the HEC, I've had to rely on official communications and also generally following Twitter threads and opinion pieces that followed from there. But basically, the HEC took votes of the 42 people on whether to put the proposals to formal consultation and whether the strike action should be suspended. And you can see the results here in the green box, which I've screen grabbed from a blog. So should the proposals be put to HE members in formal consultation, 419 against 22, 0 abstentions. So that fell, so it wouldn't. So that is a decision made by the HEC. That's the way it's done. And should the strike action be suspended for 20th to 22nd, 4-7 against 20, 10 abstentions. And that's, again, a decision. So the HEC have heard what's been done regarding the poll and have decided to go this way. Now, I can't speak for any members of the HEC. However, several members of the HEC have publicly declared how they voted and provided their own rationale for this. They tended to have used Twitter to do this. What I've done, one of the HEC members, Vicky Blake, from Leeds, who once visited us on the picket line, has actually written a blog post about this, and I put that on a link at the end, so you can see an example of one person's view on why they've done this. So the HEC have taken this decision, which you may or may not like, but that's what they've done. What I will highlight is that there is no question that what the HEC have done is within their remit, acting entirely within UCU policy and procedure in reaching this decision. And there's no argument that no one's saying that the members have done anything other than act in good faith to do what they think is best for the union that they are representing. After the HEC meeting, the General Secretary emailed all members on Friday, informing them of the results of the e-poll, and then below that informing them of the subsequent HEC decision. I want to be very careful with what I say here, but I did feel that this communication was suboptimal, primarily because it seems to me likely that those members that perhaps weren't immersed in what was going on and knew the structures of the way the union operates would have, those especially that had voted yes on the e-poll, would have then seen this message where it looked like the HEC had essentially ignored a decision, and I think that my feeling was that this would lead to some disgruntlement with the HEC as a result, and I felt that the message could have contained a little bit more information about how the HEC works and what its remit is, which I hope I've been able to provide to you in the previous slides. Okay, so what happens now? Well, just for the short term. Well, we're on strike for one more day tomorrow as part of the current mandate, not just over pensions, but it's our local strike day on pay, and it's our final one, and Unite are going to be out with us as well. So please come along to the final day of strike action. Please also vote in the reballot. Please vote in both reballots, of course. Then, another thing, HEC meets again on the 30th of March, and there usually is another branch delegates meeting before that, so to inform the HEC about branch thoughts on matters. So Imperial can put members' thoughts through to that. So do get in touch with our local branch if you've got anything that you want us to feed into the HEC via the branch delegates meeting. And I'll also add that for anyone that wishes to sign, there is an open letter to the HEC asking for membership consultation that any union member can sign if they wish. And I've put a list of links at the end where that's at the end there. This is not endorsement of that, and I'm not going to say whether I'm going to sign it or not. I'm just pointing out that it is there. Okay, I'll finish there, and do get in touch with me or any of your local reps if you've got any further questions on anything. And please do vote, and please do come along to the picket line. Thank you.